Alrighty. All right, guys. Welcome everyone. Glad to have you here and on the live stream. Looking forward to today's call. Today's actually a good one for most contractors, even as a refresher. And it's how to fire bad clients. I think we've all ran into this situation before. We may be dealing with bad clients now as we speak, and we sometimes suffer with some decision-making processes there to really, make a decision on whether we should do business with a client or not. But when I get into these conversations, when I get into this kind of training, most people that I encounter don't realize how much a bad customer is actually costing them. All right. And I mean, if you really think about it, we can all think of that nightmare customer, that just, takes your time, frustrates your team, wastes your time, adds change work orders last minute. We all have had one, right? Now think of your best customer. Think of the customer that your life would be easy if you could do business with every single day. All right. Now imagine losing two of those, what we would call A customers, um, in, oh, hold on a second, because we are too busy dealing with one D or C customer. Okay. So, out of curiosity, how many of you guys on here that are in the live here today have had a or have a bad customer? One that you just resent working with. Maybe just give me a one in the chat. Let's see if this is on par today. Cool. So, I mean, first is kind of understanding what the signs are of a bad customer, because sometimes they can go a little bit undetected, especially if you're not using a formal system to kind of track their behavior and their habits. So I see this a lot with companies that are still in the early stages of development, but it can still very much exist. I know that we've had one recently in our company that kind of went undetected under the radar, but when we walked it through the process, what we found right away was, consistently, um, we had, change work orders, stop work orders. They were consistently not paying bills on time. They gave us volumes of work, but it was, again, all very much bidded kind of work, and we didn't really earn a profit on it, and that's a big problem, right? And it could have been very easy to continue doing business with them, and losing other customers as a result of that one, result of all the energy and time that they've taken, right? Bad referrals. That's the other big problem that I find, almost most frequently is think about getting a referral if you're word of mouth, getting that referral from a customer that is a bad customer. Does that really help your business to grow? Right? But then on the other hand, your A customer or your top customer, sends you a referral. Do you think that they're referring C's and D's? No, probably not, right? So again, a lot of this comes down to is doing an actual review of your customer base, actually going over your customers and having a system or a strategy in place where we can look at both new customers coming in, all right, and existing customers that you have. All right. How many of you guys are planning to grow your business this year? Out of curiosity. Yes, perfect. Right. How many of you have adjusted your offer lately? Right. Or expanding into a new portion of business? If that's you, one thing I'm going to express to you is that it's oftentimes that we think we're going to hang on to certain types of customers, but as our business grows and develops, we can outgrow each other. All right. So again, it may not necessarily be that typical pain in the ass customer that's rude and takes your energy and stuff. It could be a customer that, again, maybe you've shifted gears on. Maybe you're offering it, and focusing on a different service, and they're still requesting one that you had. So, for example, maybe you were primarily decks and you've moved into doing bathroom remodels now. Just a random example, but we have to reevaluate what customers we're doing business with, and then also we have to get really clear on what customers that we were going to accept and what kind of the red flags are of a customer that we might do business with. Okay. So I'm going to go through a system today and hopefully it's helpful for everybody. Some of you've probably seen it, but we want to really have a way of classifying customers, okay, and what category they belong in. We like to break this down into a grade, right? So we'll say class A customer, class B, class C, class D. Class D and C, you should not be doing business with. Class B, you should be proceeding with caution. Class A is where you should be building your business to do the most amount of business with Class A, right? Now, what is a Class A? I would say a Class A customer to me is someone who pays their bills on or before they're due. Number one, a Class A customer is going to treat our teams and our crews with respect. They're going to be willing to work and negotiate through problems. Okay, they're going to generally not give us a hard time on every little detail that goes into planning the job. They typically are the ones that just want to get the job done. They're thrilled when you're there and thrilled, when things get done, but they also give referrals. Okay. That's a class A to me. And that we make a profit with. Okay. Now, as we get a little bit lower into class B, a lot of the characteristics kind of stay the same. Like we're not going to accept anybody that's not paying their bills. They'll pay their bills, everything else, but they might be a little bit more sticky around schedules, stuff like that. And again, in that category, you could still comfortably do business with them as long as it's profitable. Once we get the class C, again, they may be very friendly and easy to work with your team, but it's going to be price negotiations and slow payments. That's where we kind of see emerge in my humble opinion. And again, you'd have to use the evaluation to see where they fall in your business specifically. All right. And we want to in most cases, move away from those class C's or rehabilitate them is what I should say. A class C can be turned into a class B or a class A sometimes, not all the time if they're refusing to adhere to your policies or procedures, or you generally just don't feel like you're going to have a future with them. It may be best to part ways. And I'll talk today about how we part ways and when's a good time to do that. And class D, they're just the stereotypical nightmare customer. We've all had at one point or another, the one that, haunts our nightmares and, comes out in all different forms. We've all had one. They don't pay their bills on time. Very difficult to work with, nitpick, send you terrible reviews, if anything. Um, you know, a whole bunch of other, nasty things that they come by. And they're typically easy to sort of spot from the get-go. I call them the typical Karens. All right. I try to avoid them if we can, try to teach our teams to avoid them as well. Out of curiosity, has anybody had a class D customer as of late? No? Lucky guys. Okay. So
So
let's take
I'm sure we have.
Yeah, for sure. Right. So again, this is where I really encourage you all to take and empower your team to spot these customers because what might not be so obvious to you can be, incredibly obvious to your team, especially as you're growing or scaling. We had a particular, blind spot with this, especially as customers would treat, me differently than they would possibly treat the team, or they would, we would find them falling between us. And we had to really kind of tighten it up. And again, I think this is where a lot of this, classification stuff came from. But now, again, they're pretty easy to spot and they're not getting through, the defenses that we've got up. So for you guys that have teams, make sure that, you're making it clear what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. So let's take a look at our tool today. You guys all have it with the SOP as well. So you guys can open it for yourself. All right. But like I said, there's a way to actually do this in a systematic way. And we want to start off with, kind of looking at that profit first. Are you actually profitable? Are you in that 20 to 40% margin or above? Okay. That's going to be a full mark for that customer if you are. Okay. A lot of sins can be forgiven there. All right. If we're actually profitable moving through it, right? I'll tend to work out the personal problems if, we have some alignment on profitability, to a certain degree. Now, the next to that is it doesn't really matter how much profit you're making if they don't pay their bills on time, right? Or if it takes a long period of time to collect that in, that hurts your business, it hurts your cash flow. And you want to make sure that you're scoring that accordingly. Okay. So, anybody that's 90 days plus, obviously is a very low score. Anybody that I'm going to say, if you're in commercial, is anything less than 30 days, I'm going to give them about a 15 or, 16. And then anybody that's paying due upon completion is going to be a 20. Okay. Now, next we want to look at kind of the work volume. What's the account look like? How much consistency do we have to it, right? How many quotes do I have to do to win a job? That's another really good key indicator, that we'd want to look at and assess in terms of if we will continue to quote that company. And maybe I can share a quick example of this. We've done a lot of restoration work, working for restorators like ServiceMaster and a couple other franchises. And when we started looking at the companies and how they actually operated, um, what we kind of found out is that, one restorator was feeding us, a large volume of work. All right. We won, quite a few projects from them. But almost all of their projects ran off the rails. All right. Almost all of them included things that we were delayed and they were putting unnecessary, stuff onto us. Okay. And that affected our profitability. That affected our team morale. That affected, our scheduling. And we started actually counting the number of days and delays and stuff that were involved in their work. And we very quickly realized, hey, you know what? We might only be winning one or two of the other restorators' jobs. All right. Two out of five. All right. But when we went to do the job, we were in and out. We made a lot more profit. There was no disputes. There was no, asking for favors or anything else. And we kind of quickly determined from that point that, hey, it's much easier just to focus on that particular customer in the restoration, and for us, it was a service master at the time, than to deal with this customer that's giving us much more volume, right? The volume didn't matter if we weren't able to, work with them effectively, right? And again, that decision was made purely out of using a scale. Okay. Energy and maintenance. I think this gets undervaluated, especially again, if you have a growing, business, you have an established business, and it's not necessarily coming straight through you. It's important that we have these conversations with our team, and understand kind of what is being asked of them. All right. Again, it's easy to kind of let this, slide. But maybe they're giving your front office a hard time. Maybe they are, asking a lot from the project manager and it's distracting them from other things. I think the famous one that we run into all the time is the customer that over exaggerates everything and makes a big deal and blows it up and sends nasty emails, and those people we watch out for. We call them energy vampires, right? We don't want to deal with an energy vampire. And again, you can imagine your stereotypical nightmare customer. That's what they do, right? Everything's your fault. And like, again, they start slamming you with emails and threats and all those kind of things. And then it goes all the way down into a milder form of that, where, somebody's just consistently, asking for more, right? Asking for unnecessary visits, asking for, even calling. Like, again, you got to take some of these things into consideration. If you've set your job up properly, and you've communicated, all right, maybe they have a tendency to, get, in between that communication and continue to escalate, or maybe they refuse to deal with a project manager. That's another good example. They only want to deal with you, the owner, and you have project managers. All right. That's another situation where we're gonna look and evaluate that very carefully. Okay. And then if you're working on your own, again, really ask yourself if you're going home at night, and you're feeling upset or you're feeling anxious from dealing with this particular customer. All right. We want to make sure that we're putting that in perspective, right? And we know that for next time that we do business with them. Very often we forget a lot of what they, put us through until we have to take on that next job. And then it's like, oh yeah, I remember that now. Location. So again, can be an issue very quickly if all of your customers' jobs are out of town, or you're doing a great deal of traveling or driving to them. It may be something that you want to really kind of deep dive into and consider. And it does affect your scoring, right? So again, if I have to go, 200 kilometers every day to service a customer, that's not really sustainable. Okay. And if all of their job seems to be in that area, like that's not really, again, something that you can scale and that you want to continue doing. So, um, you know, that might be an opportunity for you to part ways. Okay. Um, the referrals. Okay. So again, referrals often can come in different forms and different categories, but like I always look at a class A customer as somebody that is going to send me more class A customers, like I said. Like, so if they haven't ever referred you, it doesn't mean that they're not necessarily a class A, but that's something that I would take in consideration, and really focusing on the customers I want to do business with the most. Okay, the ones that are helping my business to grow. Okay, if I'm putting into a situation where I have to choose who to service first, all right, or again, saying no to certain jobs, the person that has sent me the referrals is going to get a higher score, right? I'm going to be more, more aware and more persistent in helping them. Um, and again, it is just like that, right? If you've got you can't be everything to
What the
everyone,
hell?
and that sometimes you have to choose, right? So um hopefully, again, we're not throwing away good customers, but it is a part of the score, right? So the last thing is your lifetime value. Okay, and I think this one gets overlooked probably the most.
Oh,
Oh,
that's fine.
hold on.
Okay.
All right. So I would say lifetime value of a customer is probably the most overlooked, especially in certain service sectors. So if you're an HVAC contractor that doesn't really track this stuff, or plumber, electrician, but also in other things as well. So you can be a general contractor. You can be, we really need to take a better look at how much a customer actually earns us over time, how consistently their account looks. This is a big, big indicator. Where if we're, kind of reacting to business, as I would say, it's easy to overlook what the lifetime value of a customer is. Okay. And again, lifetime value, I'll give you it as an electrical example, but you could do business with somebody, in the service electrical sector, um, 25 times, 30 times over a lifetime. Okay. And that's very, very important to your stability and your growth as a business. Okay. Same thing goes with, general contractor, stuff like that. We all have some of that repeat business. Okay. But you really want to keep an eye on like the person that's going to be loyal to your brand and loyal to your company. Those people again can hide up a lot of the sins of maybe not being so polite on the phone and kind of being a little bit needy. They would be put back into more of a B class, right? But we're still scalable in that area. Okay. Any questions so far, guys? Anybody really confused on what we're discussing here?
I'm always
I
struggling with the lifetime value. Like
Yes.
because
Okay.
my clients are mostly one-offs.
So ask yourself this. Are you making it that way, or are they making it that way?
I don't know.
Okay. So if you do a job for your customer and then you never contact them again, that's your fault. That's why you don't have lifetime value. Okay. If you continuously follow up with them and there's no response and you're being ghosted, right? And then they come out of the woodwork with another job, sporadically, all right, you're gonna consider that versus the person that is responsive, does, stay in touch, and that, again, you can see yourself doing future work with or are doing future work with, right? So again, maybe And this is where that referral thing ties in for your particular situation, right? Like how many people did they refer to you, over the course of their lifetime? Like those are things that you want to track and understanding, what is a single customer worth to me? But if you don't invest anything into remarketing and like, you know, reaching back out to them, staying in touch, it's pretty hard. It's a pretty hard thing to kind of, take into consideration, right?
That makes sense.
Okay. So, and I'll give you a good example. I'm in roofing. For those of you that don't know, we do metal roofing, and it's shocking how much repeat business and lifetime value we've built with some customers. So again, we've maybe installed their metal roof. We first installed their shingle roof. We've gone back to them and replaced their gutters, their siding. We get all their service calls. Then they move houses and we repeat the process. So again, that's the kind of lifetime value you want to build in your business. That's super important, and there are people out there that are extremely loyal to brands. You've already sold to them once. It's 10 times easier to sell to someone you've already sold to, right? So again, these are the kind of things that we'd want to evaluate and take score of. Okay. Who else? Anybody else have any questions before I move on here? No? Okay.
No, it's pretty clear actually. I had
Mhm.
done up a chart of our contract clients for our maintenances and whatever, and I had
Yep.
made a column of like client type just to kind of help myself
Hmm.
associate like who do I go to first or who
Right.
like this sounds weird, but who do you put more effort into? Like
No, it doesn't sound weird. It's actually smart
okay,
business,
because I
right?
felt
No, that's
I felt like when you're judging and you're like I shouldn't judge.
right. Right.
But this kind of assessment helps me, I feel, do a better job
Right.
to know
So
where to put the extra effort.
for sure. So here's another way to kind of look at it. And you guys are in the HVAC service business. So this is actually where this evaluation comes from, like a long time ago, because the HVAC is kind of, HVAC, anything that has like a service, like an emergency service element to it. All right. You really have to be able to classify your customers, right? So again, when heating season starts and cooling season start, what customers would you rather focus on first? Who gets in the schedule first? Okay. And again, it's not to say you don't service everybody, but it's more or less like, again, we've got to put that relationship at the higher level, because if you're neglecting a class A customer because a class C or a D is taking your time, who's losing in that situation?
Everybody, actually.
Right. Exactly. So again, it is about this, right? So like there is like don't think for 1 second that you shouldn't be doing this. We're in business, all right? We're not in politics. Okay? It's not a democracy. Okay? This is real business stuff. So not knowing who your class A customers are is, basically like walking around in the dark and hoping not to hit walls. Okay? In my humble opinion. If you can't, again, even align yourself with class A's like that, those are the people you should be sending referral offers to and sending, your top offers to get them re-engaged. Sending referral offers to a class C, like they get marked off our list. They're not even allowed to get communication. We're not looking to do business with them anymore, right? We don't want their repeat business. We don't want their referrals. Okay. But if you're not putting those on a list and having a way that your team can effectively and responsibly, scale these, you're going to run yourself into some losses, right? Eventually. Oh, by the way, can you see my screen? I've been
Yes.
shown. Okay. So everyone can see the screen. Okay, great. Um, so again, this also happens, and what I want to say maybe as a caveat to this, like as our business grows and develops, has anyone here outgrown a customer?
I think we have.
Okay. I can successfully say I've outgrown many, right? So ones again that I, serviced when I first started my business are nowhere near the ones that I classify as A now, right? So the point that I'm making here is like as your business evolves, as you evolve, all right, so does your client base. Okay. So again, think about when you first started your business and the type of people were thankful to do business with. Would they still be that same person today? Right? Okay. So the other thing here, guys, that I want to kind of bring up and, for you guys to understand is like we all have an avatar of who we want to do business with. Okay. And that avatar should be, the best example of a customer that you have enjoyed that didn't take your energy, like all the things that I'm kind of bringing up here, that should be your avatar. Okay. That should be the person that you design all of your marketing and all of your client journey around if there's, if it's a sustainable demand. Okay. But if we don't really think about these things, all right, and we allow certain tolerances to go on, it's going to actually start to take you backwards, right? So again, if we're just, we'll take on anybody and it's one size fits all, you really run yourself
Yeah.
into a big problem, right? And that big problem is scalability. Okay. So again, if you're working in a situation where, you're surrounded by C's and D's, okay, there's only one way out of that situation, right? We've got to let go some of those C's and D's, and we got to get more aligned with who we do business with. And again, business, the key to it is not doing it all on hard mode, right? So if we're struggling with every single customer, all right, either our process and our systems and the way we're doing business has to change, right? Or the customer has to change. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So again, we can take this and we can analyze this. Now, does anyone think this is bias? You think that we could, maybe eliminate some of the emotions that can come about when thinking about customers?
I hope
With
so.
that,
Yeah. All
I
right.
think so.
Right. So very, very important.
with that,
Again, oh, I'll mute this. Super important that that we're looking at it in a non-biased way because again, I trust that everybody here at one point or another will want their business to be beyond them. Okay. And if we're not able to kind of put in and implement something like this, it's going to be hard for our team to identify who is our best customer. Okay. So again, whether you're single, whether you have a team, this is super, super important stuff. Okay. Um, and then now, what do we do? What do we actually do when we identify a C or a D? Okay, what's the appropriate way to say no? Okay, now I'm going to share something with you guys. I am a recovering yes man. There was no amount of pain or sorrow that I could be put through that would allow me to say no. Okay. And I can remember this back when I first started my business, and that's why I say I'm recovering. I worked for a big commercial general contractor, and they were maybe good as I look back at, but it was an absolute nightmare. Every day I'd wake up going, I can't believe I'm working for these guys. The things that they would do and they crossed every single boundary there is to have, and they were nasty. I hated working with them, and they genuinely made my life hell. I knew that emails would start and threats would be thrown, and like it was just one over another. Okay. Now, what I learned from that has really stuck with me, and I hope it sticks with you as well, right? Is that, you know, again, in that situation, I felt like, hey, I need this work. I need this work, or, they're filling that gap, or, I'll stop doing with them. But really, it was a matter of learning how to say no. Okay. And that's something we can all learn from. I'll tell you now, and as it sets, my favorite word is no. All right. I recite it in the mirror. I say it over and over again, as many and as often times as I can, because there is no other word in my vocabulary that's made me more money than no. All right. I
Hey, is
say
that where your daughter gets it from?
there you go. I've taught her well. I actually tried to shoot the recording of that yesterday to share with you. But why is no such a powerful word? Right? Why is no profitable? Okay. Because and I'll tell you from my own personal experiences, like the majority of people that you encounter, especially if you're looking at long-term customers, if you don't set your boundaries right off the bat, if you don't, if you go in playing on their game, all right, you're going to lose a high percentage of the time. All right. It's when you step back and say no to certain things, and especially when you start to evaluate what's a good customer, what's a bad customer. Okay. it becomes easier and easier to say that word no. And I know a lot of people, for whatever reason, struggle with saying no. All right. How many of you guys have taken on a job and right from the get-go, you're like, why did I do this? I bet you there's not a single person here that couldn't say they had that experience, right?
Yeah,
You
I
know
think
that
we've all have.
for sure in your gut, you know it, and there's just something that happens that doesn't allow you to just say go like no, right? Or you have that customer that makes that, unreasonable request, and like instead of saying no, you just, you chalk it up as being part of the job or like what, what's acceptable. But again, how does that customer respect you? Right? You could take somebody who is in a B or a C category now, and by saying repeatedly yes, they turn to D, right? So there is an opportunity to rehabilitate, customers that are difficult. I'm not saying that that's where the finesse of all this comes into play, but whether it's accepting the job or during the job, like you have to be able to have your systems and your solid ground, you have to hold it. All right. Again, you can do this tastefully, and that's what I'm going to hopefully share with you today. But everybody here, should be practicing the word no in the mirror. All right. It was very helpful. And it came to an obvious point for me where I started to realize that, hey, you know what? Everything that was taking my energy, everything that was making my day generally shitty, and all of the accumulation of problems came from 20% of my customers. All right. Okay. So you mean 80% of the jobs that were running smoothly and like, that we had no cash flow issues and everything else, 80% of those were, class A's and B's. And then there's this small minority of people that just destroy everything else and have, staff turning over and all these other like, horrific problems. And had I taught my team to go, no, we're not, or, we don't need your business, or, we're going to fire them, you know, I would have accelerated my growth. I would have had a far better experience as a contractor. All right. But you don't know until you actually analyze and until you actually can step back from it, not making an emotional decision, a reactive decision, all right, but an actual data-driven decision. Okay. And we talk a lot about that, but this helps to remove the emotions. This helps to remove the bias. Let me give you guys one more example before I move on here. How many of you guys absolutely believe every word that comes out of a sales rep's mouth?
I don't know, Jay, you seem pretty honest to me.
For sure, right? I touche. I take that. So, you know, let me give you an example. When you have a sales rep involved, how easy is it to talk you into that this is a great customer and that everything is well and swell, right? Pretty easy, right? So, I mean, I'm talking about your internal sales team. Okay. Um, and you continue doing business with somebody that is third party or through a sales rep, and they start displaying all these things. Do you think that the sales rep's going to bring it up? You think that they care? Nope. If you're using service managers or anything along those lines, nope. All right. Who's going to feel the brunt of it? Who's going to feel and be able to tell you if the customer's a C or a D? Who do you think that person's going to be?
It's your front line.
Right? I'll tell you, the first person that's always told me that the straight answer is my office admin, our CSRs. Okay. They actually have a better better feel of that because they have no bias. They have no commission in the game, I would say, right? And this can happen with project managers, everybody. You have to look at where their bias comes from. All right. And we have to make sure that we're asking the right people, the right questions at the right time. And that as much as possible, okay, that we're making this a team sport, right? Because I could tell you from my own personal experience, I asked the sales rep, hey, what's going on with this customer? Oh no, he's great. He's all good, blah, blah, blah. We had a little problem here, but like I just hear like Charlie Brown talking. You know what I mean? Now, the next place I'm going to ask is my frontline CSR. Like, hey, what did you think? Oh, now I'm starting to get a little bit more, and then I'm going to a crew leader where I find out, what they're really like to work with. Okay. So again, don't fall for that bias. And you want to try and continue to have this as being a consistent system and a way for you to kind of say, hey, you know what? This is where I'm going to cut the line. Right. Um, has anyone struggled for a long time and whether they should do business with somebody or not? Has anyone had that like sinking feeling every time they've called? Right?
Yeah, I'd say uh I haven't given enough bandwidth for my project managers to cancel jobs.
Okay. I love that. And that's a great empowering moment for you because who knows if the customer is good or bad?
The project manager.
Damn right. Okay.
He's like, I'm gonna get like my phone blown up. They're
Right.
not gonna be happy. They're gonna hold payment.
Right. So all the red flags go up, right? So my solution on that end is like again, either they're going to be rehabilitated if they're shooting under the score and they're in that D zone, they're fired. There's no coming back. There's no exceptions like and again, it's a non-bias like if we can agree on that score, all right, we're not doing business with them. All right? And I have recently had something escalated to me where we canceled a job and we're literally sitting on all the material, everything else gave back the deposit. We don't care. Okay. That should never have come
Wow.
through.
Bro.
And again, it's the reason I'm capable of making that decision. And now I've got $50,000 in material is my team's more important than any deposit, any amount of um,
And the other part is you have enough confidence in your sales and marketing and your data
mhm.
that you're confident that like, hey, we don't need your business.
So but on the other side, like, do you know how much turnover comes from bad customers? Do you know how much your
Oh
team
yeah.
then
Oh yeah.
here's another side to it. Like if you don't empower your team, okay, and like it can only go through you whether a customer gets hired or gets fired. All right. What that does is it creates a place where it's not safe to have those conversations. It's not again, no one is going to make the decision on your behalf. It's always going to come back to you. Right. And then you complain that you get stuck with all these crappy decisions, right? So this is easily something that can be delegated and it can be empowering for your team. No project manager should have to worry whether or not they can fire a customer. If that customer has displayed the behavior and that is backed up by the facts of the matter, right? I don't want them coming to me. I want them to just do it. I don't care, right? My team's way more important than that customer ever will be, right? One person, like, we all know how hard it is to hire good staff these days, right? So like if you lost, a project manager as a result of continuously doing business with a bad customer, like what's that? Like who's losing there, right? You're kind of like letting the enemy win at that point. Okay, because they're hurting your business, they're hurting your profits, they're hurting your schedule, they're hurting every element of your business. All right, but you're allowing it, and it's because you didn't let the frontline people deal with it. Right. So let's talk a little bit about how to deal with it, and then we're going to talk about what you can do in terms of creating a management portion to this. Okay. So I'm of the school of thought that like again, if a client is demonstrating these things and we've captured the data of them doing it, that we have an automatic procedure. All right. And like I said, especially for new customers, okay? And I think this gets overlooked a lot. There is a lot that can be discovered early on, even in the early stages of the sales process, that will indicate what kind of customer they are. Okay. Good example of this in our lead intake form or our lead intake process, we ask them, hey, have you worked with another contractor in the past? Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. What was that experience like? And they just start ripping into all the contractors that have done them bad. All right. Red flag. All right. I'm going to decide right there. Or the customer, again, that starts to demonstrate the Karen behavior right off the bat before you even get them in their estimates. Right. They're rude. They're pushy. They're not overly friendly. Or again, you get that sense from them and they're demonstrating to you that, that they don't value your business and they don't, they're maybe looking for other things. Those are great opportunities to discuss those type of people and what those flags are with your team. right? And I would say we all would benefit right away from doing a couple of steps to make sure that we're dealing with the best clients possible in the first place. Okay. So a classic example of this that I can share with you that might relate here is a general contractor calls you. Again, maybe you know them, maybe you don't, but you check their credit score, and you should be doing that right now, by the way, all of them, and they've got 5 lawsuits, 6 lawsuits pending. Is that somebody we do business with? Of course not, right? Now, again, is that someone and that should be getting through your defenses and agreeing to large scale projects with? No, right? I'd say that's a setup, right? And that's going to happen a lot, especially as some of the bigger GCs and stuff they start to get underwater, all right? If you're going in to do work that somebody else has started and hasn't finished, red flag, all right? Don't never dive for a falling sword, in my opinion. That's a flat no for us. That's a thank you, see you never, and I don't care who they are. Okay. I'm not going in. If they had a problem with whoever they hired for that job, that's I don't care whose fault it is. I'm not getting myself involved in that. Right. And now you can use your own judgment on those that, there are some situations where it works out, but I would say that your liability and risk goes up through the roof in that situation. Right. And we've probably all had that experience at one point or another where we've been called to finish someone else's stuff or give a report or, generally be pitted against another contractor. Again, those are immediate reasons to say no and just to back away from it. There's not enough work there's not enough scarcity in the world for me to jump onto something like that. Okay. So is anybody in their current intake process, is anybody asking these sort of questions that are designed to kind of see, what that customer's like to deal with? Has anybody got that built into their lead intake? No?
I want to do it stronger. Like we just did a client script, right? Like that we
Yep.
did with the jot forms.
Hmm.
I would love to infuse more of this strength because I drive my lead technician crazy by
Yep.
saying yes to all business.
Yeah, and
It
again,
makes it mental,
it
but we
totally
just
is
focus on bringing in new business. We
right.
do the credit check, but
Hmm.
outside of that, that's the much preparation we have for new client
Right.
potentials. And we've had a couple where thankfully, Johnny reminded me to stay on top of them, but
Hmm.
the guy was like, oh, once he had his pricing, he ghosted.
Okay.
He didn't pay his bill until I hounded him.
Okay. So again, here's the thing, right? If we go into all situations, guarded, all right, we're probably not, probably going to push away A's and B's, right? Like, so the reason I'm saying this is that you're looking for a certain set of flags or indicators to come up. All right. For us, when the flags come up, they don't necessarily mean we're not going to do business with them. And again, I'll give you an example of this in a second, but it's that I'm going to proceed with caution. Okay. I'm gonna do even more due diligence. So like, a good example is, anybody ever heard of a Lair Homes before? Lair Homes, it's a franchise. They're a franchise builder here in Ontario. Okay, so I'm not going to name any names that, like, they have some good franchise owners, but they've had some really terrible ones, and we happened to run into a really, really terrible one that was unable to pay his bills, and it ended up costing our company a lot of time in court and a lot of, you know, aggravation and stuff. But the franchise as its whole, they have 10 or 15 different locations. Okay, and then recently we had an opportunity to do work with another location. And immediately the flags already came up, and I stopped it at the contract phase. So they sent us the contract. I already been through court and everything else with this particular contract. I know it very well. And all it was me to call that owner of that and tell him directly where I stood. All right. And we were, negotiating a fairly large contract. I think it was over 200K. And we had that moment where we connected, and he assured me, and I changed some of the contract terms, so that problem didn't happen again. All right. Now, what did I do differently there?
You showed your self-worth.
Set the boundaries. I showed my
Yeah.
worth. I made sure that I was clear with him what what would happen and why I was being aggressive about that particular contract. Why we had terms removed, like paid when get paid, like all this garbage that gets put in these things, and I was fighting for it. But I made it clear to him, I'm not looking to push his business away. I want to do business with him. All right. But I wasn't willing to accept what had happened in the past with another situation, right? So again, those kind of examples come up over and over again where we can rehabilitate, a customer that we would otherwise write off, okay? Or at least have the caution up, right? So you mentioned earlier about like payment, right? So some may not get approved for it's paid, paid when billed, right? So you may not extend credit terms to them. That could still be good business, right? That's still, that's still revenue. But if you have no filter at all and anyone can come through, what's going to happen, right? Are you going to be able to correct those things, or at least have your eyes open if something could occur, right? So again, a lot of these things can be systemized through your CRMs, through, these sheets and stuff as well. If you're using JobTread, you can score clients. Again, we want to make sure that we have a process that our whole team is involved with, that, provides the least amount of bias as possible, and that no bad apples get through, because one bad apple can just destroy, companies, right? And they really can. It's if you get one or two of them a year, I think you're doing pretty good. But how many of you guys are probably existing, with 7 or 8 of them in your pipelines, right? How many of them are repeat offenders here? Okay. How many of them have you just outgrown too, right? Like they doesn't mean they're bad people, or like it's just not a good fit anymore. Right. So we've got to have the courage to say no at that point. And the next thing is like how do you do that in a professional way? Okay. I can tell you with all honesty that I've let customers go that I still respect enormously, and that, again, I was really, quite crushed that we had to let go, but my model changed, right? The way that we did business changed. And, they were good customers. They were A customers at a certain point in my career, and I depended on them greatly. But as I grew and developed, they were no longer fitting that model, right? So those are the decisions that you have to make along the way to protect your business, to protect what you're building, right? And again, the definition of your A customer may change. And again, you got to be prepared to let some customers go. So what I've done for you guys here, is I've come up with a couple of different templates that you can use or create some variations of. And starting with the first one, which is the new prospect, where I think most of us could benefit, and having some sort of criteria of whether you're going to deal with someone or not. Personally, I know I probably get some flack for this, and it goes against a couple of what other people would say, but almost 50% of our leads don't qualify. Period. Full stop. They don't get quotes. We don't go beyond a phone call. All right. And the reason behind that is because of partially to do with the nature of metal roofing. If someone's just generally, way outside of the budgetary, and don't check the other boxes, we're going to turn them away pretty quickly. Okay. We don't want to waste our time even giving them a quote. Okay. And we've learned that over a period of time. And ironically, I know this might sound bad, but I don't qualify to get a quote for my own business. Right? If I called in and went through the process, I would be denied a quote. Like I wouldn't even get through the first stage. So because I don't fit the model customer that we expect. Okay. And again, this is kind of taken to a different level, but and I wouldn't recommend that for maybe HVAC or service-based companies, but that is a real thing. So we want to make sure that we're communicating with respect, all right, that we're protecting our own brand. And really what we want to make sure of is that they understand the reason why, okay, and that we're not going to end up getting bad reviews or anything silly like that, okay? On the other hand, what I see more often is people take the call in and say, yeah, I'll get you a quote, and then just ghost them. That's the wrong way to deal with it. Okay. or they don't return their call, and you leave that other person, being ignored. That's not the way to deal with it. Okay. Have the decency about you, and have this built into your system that if someone's not going to be a fit, or if I can't get to their quote for 2 or 3 weeks, reach out to them and let them know that. Okay. It's okay to say that, or you're at capacity. Okay. I would rather you say that I'm too busy. All right. And maybe it is a good customer. Maybe it is an A client. Okay. But you've got to be honest with them. Like, if you can't take on more work, all right, you've got to let them know that. Okay. Has anybody had to recently tell somebody they couldn't do their project?
I
Anybody?
probably should right now.
Okay. So here's the thing. Here's your opportunity. Take that customer, put them through the scale, and then you can easily send them that email and let them down, or tell them that it's not the right fit, right time, whatever the situation may be. All right, because we're trying to preserve our reputation as well. Okay. Again, even though they may not fit with your company, doesn't mean they're bad people or that they had bad intention for you. It just generally means, hey, I'm either too busy. Again, I have other customers that I have to service, above them, and you're protecting your business. You're doing what's right. Okay. What's wrong is taking on the work and doing a poor job, not meeting the scheduled deadlines, not meeting their expectations. That's wrong, because you've entered into an agreement where there was a set expectation and you're not making it. Vice versa. Okay. So again, if you know you can't make those expectations, it's time to be a responsible owner and a responsible company. Let those people know. Okay. It's actually not as damaging, or it's not as people appreciate that more than just nothing at all. Okay. And put yourself in that situation. Yeah, there's a little shock, and sometimes they whine and cry about it a little bit. But can honestly say I've never gotten a bad review for saying no. And we do it 5 to 6 times a day. All right. People get it. They understand. They move on. All right. Now, on the other hand, we have gotten a few bad reviews for not getting back to people quick enough with their quote after we've agreed to it. Right. So again, use it, use it with responsibility here. Right. So again, when a prospect, you have a discovery call with them and they've shared a budget with you that doesn't fit. Okay. Is it worth it to stop it there? Or are you going to waste your time doing the quote just to be polite? How many of you done that? Come on, be honest. I'm sure a few of you had. Oh, I'm just going to inflate the quote. I'm going to make it bigger. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Don't do that shit. Okay. Just tell them honestly and openly that the budget doesn't fit. Okay. You don't owe them an explanation beyond that. All right. It can be as simple as an email, but we're not just out there throwing out prices. We're not out there, inflating and deflating prices for this. That's the wrong way to do it. It's a wrong lesson to teach your team as well. Okay. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. And again, it leaves you open for a couple other nasty problems as well along the way. Okay. So again, better to be open, protect your time, protect your team's time. Okay. This is what it allows you to do if you're, properly evaluating every prospect, every lead, every customer, right? And we're keeping them on that evaluation score. So the next is when you're ending a client relationship, which can be much like breaking up with a girlfriend or something at times. I've had that experience too. Luckily with business, most people just move on. But do that respectfully. Okay. Do that sincerely. Templates, like, you're welcome to use these. All right. But if you're breaking up with a long-term client, I would always prefer you did that in person. All right. I'd prefer that you had a conversation with them and gave them a clear, honest explanation why, followed up with an email. Okay.
May I
So,
jump in?
yeah, absolutely.
So there's a few clients that I have on a short list of like,
Mhm.
I want to put them in collections kind of thing, right?
Okay.
And we've sent them like hey, this is your final notice. Like, pretty much all that's left would be a breakup email.
Yeah.
Would you go to this length, or would you just throw it into collections? Like, how
So
would
yeah,
you do it?
so if they owe me money, like, that's a different, like, a category for me. Like,
Okay.
the real nasty, like, fists come out, and yeah, I'm not sending them anything pleasant at that point, right? So that's me. You do you. Again, I think of more breakups in that C category, where somebody we've tried to rehabilitate, we've had another project, they paid their bill, and they request something else, right?
So this is
That's
strictly for those C clients.
yeah, I would say
I'm on board.
anything. Yeah, I deal like D's. D's are D's, right? Like they're deadbeats in my opinion, right? So like they get no, I deal with them completely different, right? They're going out the door, and I'll be looking and evaluating how they got in the door in the first place. So, the other thing too that maybe I haven't talked enough about here is about like the rehabilitation of a customer. Okay. So, like I said, you can take a C and negotiate them back into a B or an A category, right? Sometimes it's just communication. Sometimes it's just not being clear and setting real boundaries. Okay. And I see this most often. I know it from my own experience. Um, I've had emotional feelings about somebody or a situation. Okay, and made the wrong choice and lost a customer over it when it didn't necessarily have to go that way. Okay. I've had other people in my business do the same. All right. It's very easy, especially in construction, right? We have a project that goes, sideways. We may be at fault for some things. They may be at fault for some things. At the end of the day, all right, the customer, at the end of the thing, they have to be willing to adjust so that the problem doesn't happen again. Right. And that you're drawing your boundaries. Okay. You're giving them a warning. You're asking them to stop something or to, be clear. And how often do you do this? Right? How many of you are afraid of setting those boundaries? Okay. That's something you're going to need to get over very quickly, right? That's something that you need to work towards systemizing, because there should never be a point where your boundaries are being crossed and you don't say anything, because that then truly is on you. Okay. If a customer didn't know that, hey, paying my bill at 45 days or 50 days was offensive to me and that was causing us grief, and I never said a word. All right. And then all of a sudden I have an emotional outburst and, call him up and tell him how much a dick he is and he owes me money. Who looks like the bozo there? Okay. So the better way to deal with that is to point out clearly what what it is that is causing you the grief. All right. Be clear with them what you want them to do moving forward. And a lot of times they can be pissed off, but respect you enough to keep doing business with you. And I've had plenty of experiences, even in the last, month or so that this has happened. Okay. But if you don't say it and you don't say it in the proper way, all right, you're really kind of the loser at the end of it. Yeah, go ahead, Sivach.
So, okay, so what I'm getting from this is empower my project managers to cancel
100%.
jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that being said,
Cancel or rehabilitate. So again, if they're bringing to you a situation, because remember the bias thing, all right? So they might be rubbing that project manager wrong, not necessarily on paper doing anything wrong, right? Like maybe it's the phone calls, it's the tone, it can be all of those things. That's not a reason to cancel a contract. Like just because two people don't like each other, and we've talked about this before, like I mean, lots of people don't like it, they just don't get along, right? That's not the reason to cancel the contract. What you would do then in that place would, step in with possibly a warning or, setting some boundaries of how they're going to communicate. Those are the first steps, right? You don't want to risk losing the business first, and you want to make sure that there's no bias. But after that, if there is, you got to empower them to fire them.
Got it. Okay, they're making the judgment calls, they're doing what's right, they're empowered, they're making the right decisions. That's great. Going to the sales team now. Okay.
Yep.
I don't, correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
This is a separate department, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but should they just try to close everything?
No.
Bring
No,
it in
hell
and
no.
then okay.
Oh, hell no. No.
Okay,
So,
there we go. There we
again,
go.
so
That's why we're here.
ethics and like they have to understand. So like this comes a lot back to how you communicate as a team. All right. So like if a sales rep has it in their mind that they should sell everything that walks the earth, you're going to find yourself in a lot of bad situations. Okay. Now, on the other hand, there's, when a job goes through and it depends on how you're being compensated, those sales reps, right? They have to understand what we'll accept and what we won't accept. And again, if they brought in a bad customer and we don't do a lessons learned and we set some boundaries with our sales rep of what we're going to accept and what we're not. So a good example is, the guy that they had to fight tooth and nail for on price, right? The one that was like nickeling and diming. Okay. The next time we have a customer like that, that's a hard no, right?
Well, yeah, so the sales rep wouldn't get paid their
Right.
commission if we cancel for a reasonable reason. So
Right.
they put all that time and effort into a customer.
Right.
They sign the customer, and then they don't get paid.
So, but a lot of the problems, what I was saying earlier, almost like 70 or 80% can be avoided by proper intake, right? So like, and especially if you have that setter that's acting as a sort of a
I'm
balance
the setter
between.
right now.
There
I'm
you
kind
go.
of the setter.
So like again, when you're asking those initial questions that are in discovery of what kind of person this is that you're dealing with, right? And people are, people are people, right? So like if they've, like it just shared the example, if they've had a nightmare with every contractor they've ever worked with, okay, that's the time to say, hey, thank you very much, but no thank you, right? If
Mm-hmm.
they're in a certain neighborhood, for example, again, yeah, they may be great, but like, is it worth me sending my sales rep out to like, the ghetto and Scarborough to like, get, chase down a below average job for us? No. Right? Now, could he sell it? Yeah, he may, but like that almost always ends up in the same, the same place, right? And this is where over time you want to embed this in all of your business and culture is that you'll find that, you get narrower and narrower and narrower as your business grows on like what customer is ideal for you, right? I'm down to the point where like I deal with the same person every single day, 3 times on Sunday. And like our salespeople know like who we can sell to just by a conversation. We know right away, like this one fits or it doesn't. And like I said, 50% of the leads are getting tossed out for whatever reason. And I empower them to do that. Like, I don't care if they don't like the tone of their voice. I'm not like, there's so much opportunity. And like, I only want to do business with good customers, right? Ones that are going to help my business grow. So, like, again, on the sales front, it's just as important to drill this stuff and to get them clear about who we do business with, clear about the avatars, so they're not making the mistake of selling to the wrong person, right? Because again, they could be a good customer for someone else, but not for you and your business, not for the way you operate, right? Like, again, a good example is like you provide a fully supervised project. You have a project manager on site versus, what their expectation is just some backyard contractor, right? How are you ever going to align with that? And they feel they've always paid too much. How are you ever going to align that? You're not, right? So again, could it be sold?
So what you're saying,
Yep.
is, you're saying 3 things: empower the project manager,
Yep.
hold the sales team accountable,
Mm-hmm.
but in
Empower
return
them.
for that level of accountability,
Mm-hmm.
give them an abundance of qualified leads.
Yeah, exactly. And again, make sure you're screening which ones come through, right? Like a lot of it's right in the very
I,
first part of the
I'm not even
conversation.
doing like, I think on the setter front, I'm just
Yeah,
I'm setting everything.
right. Right. So like I encourage and everything that I try to work with is a scored process, right? So like again, to get the bias out of the way, like on your front, like people qualify by a score. Like the same thing, like I score all our leads, right? Just when they're coming in, they get lead scored, right? The ones that were low scored that got onto the board, if we don't have time to get to them, we send these letters. Hey, sorry, no thanks, right? But we're only trying to focus on the top, the top scored leads. And that's where a lot of times you will vet that and kind of filter that through, right? Especially if you're dealing higher volume leads. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. And then in terms of the sales reps, it's really, again, just having them picture what the ideal customer is and sharing like when the job's complete, most of the times companies fail to market back to the team, right? So when you've had a really successful job in an A customer, make sure you use that as a case study. Make sure your sales reps know that's the guy, that's the one we want. Like find me more of them, right? Make sure that you guys are discussing these things. What is, the best customer? How do we serve them? How do we, get more of them? Okay, that's the conversations that should be had, and it needs to be across the board. And like I said, the first place to kind of get this started is having a structure in which you're evaluating like what is the best customer. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it'll help your sales tremendously too, because again, I much rather get more leads than chase down bad leads. It costs a fortune to do it that way, and then your sales reps are distracted. And that, like, can you imagine you're chasing around
Yeah.
3 C's
Yeah.
when there's
Yeah.
an A sitting there that should just be closed, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, for you other guys, ending a work with a general contractor or builder, again, how to properly communicate that. There's a couple other ones, responding to disrespectful or abusive behavior. Again, I want you guys to think about empowering your team. Anybody that bad talks your frontline staff or somebody they feel is less than them, get rid of those people immediately. I don't care what the contract is worth. I don't care how much, we've got invested in it. Like, if you are willing to disrespect, a CSR, or disrespect anybody I don't care if it's the truck driver. I don't care. All right. That shows me what kind of human being you are, and I'm not doing business with you. Okay. And I've canceled many contracts over, what other people would, be, less likely to take out, but it almost always works out, right? If they're already abusing people, and again, think about the way that they talk to your frontline staff. If they're demanding, if they're being rude, those are the people you do not want to do long-term business with. You don't want to do business with, period, right? And the last thing you want to do is lose a team member over a customer. Just not worth it. Okay. Canceling service agreements, for our HVAC, electrical guys, stuff like that. Again, this can happen, especially if we're looking at, profitability on some of these service agreements. You will find, and I've certainly found out the hard way, when we're giving budgetary prices, we're kind of taking a bit of a risk on them, and then people abuse the program. Okay. You got to look out for that, very, very carefully. You got to make sure that that this customer is actually profitable, and you should be purging customers that you're not making, not making the margins that you need to make with them, right? Do them a favor, do yourself a favor. Okay. And then the last one for all of you guys that love to just do those bids you never win. All right. My rule of thumb, anytime that I have done more than 3 quotes for someone and haven't won, all right, we go right to a paid estimate at that point. That usually gets rid of them. Okay. Don't be the guy that's just doing quotes. Right. Look back in their folder. If you're only winning the jobs that you were lowest bid and they were, weren't profitable for you, get rid of those guys. Okay. So as we get wrapped up here, I want to encourage you guys to think about what we do for our A customers. Okay. When you've identified your A customers, are those the guys you're supposed to, go out and see, send Christmas cards to, sing beautiful lullabies to, right? Should we be focusing on them? Hell yeah, right? I would recommend, if you have an A customer, all right, and you have a list of your A customers, you put your priorities into them. Okay. B's, again, at your discretion. How you handle them. I appreciate the B's and the A's. It's those C's and D's that I can't stand. Okay. And I encourage you again to fire them as bests and make room for more A's. All right. Look at your marketing, look at what you're doing to attract them. All right. If you are sitting on an abundance and you go through this scoring system and you find out that you have an abundance of C's and D's, all right, that is 100% the way you're marketing. You're fishing in the wrong pond. Okay. So, again, I encourage everybody to kind of take some action steps on this. For some of you guys that know this already, get it implemented with your team, right? Make sure that everybody's following the process with it. Very simple, but highly profitable thing to do, right? Again, we want to purge our list, especially service companies, having an evaluation of them at least, I would say biannually, where you look at your customer base and their performance. You can also put your trade partners in there as well, evaluating them, deciding who you're going to work with as a service provider, subcontractors. You can kind of wrap this in a very similar system. All right. But you've got to cut loose the dead weight as often as you can. And right. So we got to prune the tree. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Where is this information going to be?
Oh, so I dropped it right in the chat.
Oh, you did.
Yeah, so let me grab everybody a link again, just in case you came in later.
And the other
s-
part that I wanted to check on too was I'd love to have that list of questions to ask a new client.
Oh, yeah, I got tons of those. No problem.
Yeah, I want
like
that too, please.
that
Yeah.
would be really good because I
Yeah, I've
think we
got
skipped that step too many times.
Yeah, absolutely. That's thanks for bringing that up, and I will shoot that out with this as well and put it in the members area. Yeah, the lead intake, you mean? The
Yes.
scored
Yeah.
lead in intake, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
again, it's a little different for everybody's company, but like there's a ton of, opportunity to really evaluate early on. And all good companies do, right? Like they can tell right off the bat, more or less if this is somebody that aligns with our company, right?
Mhm.
So I'll share all that with you guys. Cool. Any other questions, guys? Anybody not get the tool? Anybody not have the resources yet?
I'm just making sure I got everything here.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
that's,
and you just make a copy of it.
yep.
Okay. It'll all be
Okay.
posted in school too in the members area, just so you guys know, like the training and stuff that you've seen here, it's all posted in the free area. But the resources will be in the members area. Okay, so you can link that off the training if you weren't on the actual call. All right, guys, everyone have a wonderful